Yes.
Two concerns. The operation of the closed circuit TV, is it in operation and where it's working throughout the city or not? And then I have another question.
Go ahead.
Second question in regards to hiring, in regards to police and fire. Obviously, there's a resident status that guys get points for. I addressed it 4 years ago. But I still see a lot of out-of-towners receiving, obviously, the best paying jobs in the city through police and fire. And I don't know if you guys have rectified that problem or not. We can help the city, obviously, by hiring people who are natives and residents of the city.
Good evening. Again, thank you for having us here. The two questions were, the first one involved the closed circuit TV through the city. Is it working or is it not? That's fluid at any given time. To give everybody a background on this closed circuit TV, there were actually 3 separate systems. I've learned more about them than I wanted to over the last 2 years. They were put in by different entities using different forms and cannot speak to each other in electronic terms. So we can't just combine them into one system. We have to maintain all 3. We found a lot of problems as we've tried to fix them, and they're getting old as we go. So as fast as we fix one camera, another one goes down, or a wire goes down, and we're finding some that were probably improperly placed at the first part. They also weren't placed with a look toward today's crime picture. They were placed with a look toward when they were put in from an economic standpoint, where stores are and stuff like that. So what we're doing on that is we have the company doing an entire sweep of all the cameras, keeping as many as possible up while we look at today's picture and where we should site cameras if we were starting from scratch today. Then we're going to take the systems that are essentially outmoded to the point of not being able to fix them anymore, try to junk those and put in new cameras where they belong today to address today's crime picture and economic activity. On the hiring the police officers, police and fire were governed by New Jersey law. New Jersey law currently is that they have to be a Jersey City resident when they take the test, and they have to maintain that residency through hiring and for the first year of their job. The state legislature tried to increase that. I support that. The longer they're here, the better. It's important jobs in the community, and it makes the young people in the community get a better chance to see their police and firefighters when they're neighbors. But it didn't go anywhere in the state this year.
In regards to that, you obeyed that process by lying, obviously, saying that they are residents at the time of taking the test. And in regards to doing the background check, some things are obvious. Like if a guy went to Iowa State and he's 24, he didn't move to Jersey City when he was 22 while he still was at Iowa State taking the test. So again, it's a lot of things that you guys can do to eliminate people so that when guys from Jersey City can be placed higher in the rankings.
Yeah, we one of the things we did recently, did all our background checks, which is referring to the fact that some people, I'll shortcut if you don't want, referring to the fact that some people lie on their background checks and essentially commit fraud by claiming they live here when they don't, just to get the job. One of the things we've done to stop that is our background checks used to be done kind of on an ad hoc basis. So when we knew we were hiring people, we'd grab detectives and say, right, you have to stop doing detective work and start doing background checks. We created a unit that solely does background checks. We took one of our best lieutenants who used to be involved in internal affairs, so he knows how to ferret out lies and that kind of fraud, and we gave him a unit that does all the background checks, so they look at everybody and get used to the same tricks people use. So if people are using a phony address, we found already several people mysteriously living at the same address in Jersey City. So we're starting to catch, some of that. Very difficult. I'm not going to lie to you, it's a very difficult process in New Jersey. Most of the court decisions where people have challenged it have went the way of the applicant. The judges are very leery of saying someone doesn't live somewhere because we determined that they got mail somewhere else or that they have a significant other that they spend time with. It's not impossible, but the odds are stacked against us. But again, we're working on it, and people in the state, at the state legislature, have recognized the problem, mostly pushed by us in Newark. And Camden actually is on board with us too, trying to push for a much more stronger residency. I'd rather that, I'll be honest, my personal opinion, I'd rather that we let anyone take the test, but you have to move here. And you have to live here once you get the job. Because I'm for a strong pool of applicants, but then I want them to live here in Jersey City.
That legislation was vetoed by Governor Christie, by the way. Yes.
To know the procedure, what are they doing with Ocean Avenue between Winfield to Seaview and Gates Avenue?
The whole area, Ocean Avenue. The lady wanted to know what they're doing with Ocean Avenue down by Greenville.
They're supposed to be redeveloping for the last 3-4 months and haven't heard anything yet.
We recently passed an ordinance that changes the zoning in that area. And what it does is, we're trying to look forward in time and develop it as a commercial corridor. So we're able to get businesses in there, restaurants in there, some buildings in there. And the plan stretches from Merritt Street, the southernmost portion of Ocean Avenue, all the way up to Cater. So it takes into account Winfield. But it just got passed by council last month. So right now, we've had several meetings. I've met with the Public Works Director and the people, other department heads. And the first thing is when we get a little closer to the springtime, there's going to be a lot of work up there as far as beautification, cleaning the area up, anything that we can do to make the area look better. Murals, we have several locations that we discussed putting the murals. But then we have to work on bringing businesses in and making it attractive for businesses. So right now, the innovation team is working with some of the businesses, trying to find out exactly what they can do to bring some business in there. But this is all with the input of the people that live there. So we continuously ask what kind of business do you want there, what do you want to see. So it started, it's going to take some time, but believe me, it's going to happen. It's going to change.
Because I heard they were supposed to be knocking some homes down between Winfield to Seaview. How true it is, I don't know.
No, they're not.
But before we get to the business, the new businesses, I love the plan, it's a great plan. How do we get rid of the open-air drug dealing going on right in that area right now today?
How you doing? We've been working with the South Greenville Association since the 2.5 years I've been at the South. It's a frustrating problem. We've made numerous arrests at that location. What we're trying to do now that we have more manpower, the last year, is increase that presence. That instead of just making an arrest, leaving the area, make the arrest and get those uniformed cops there to hold that area basically. And that's the plan moving forward. By the summer, I'm sure maybe we'll touch on it. We're getting a lot more additional offices, so that's going to make that a lot easier. So we're well aware of the problem and we're addressing it.
Captain, can you add MLK between 1 Avenue and Van Nostrand? There's like shooting up in that area.
Yes.
And I saw some foot patrol officers, but the foot patrol officer, from the new recruit, and they're about 5'4".
Right.
The pistol heavier than that. You need to try to have experienced officers with a rookie, opposed to having 2 rookies up there. Because that area has changed tremendously.
Yes. What we've all recognized, what the mayor's recognized, is the manpower that we were at just 2 years ago was just not sufficient to police Jersey City in general, and particularly the South District. We were decimated by retirements, and with the economy turning down. So we're starting to build back up again, and we need the manpower. We went from a year and a half ago just having enough officers to answer calls. We answered 30,000 calls just in the South District last year. Yeah, so, but now we recognize we have to answer the calls as quickly as possible, but we have to get out there on foot and be a presence, and we're headed in that direction.
Can I say a couple things on that? So when we took office in 2013, they had 770 officers in the Jersey City Police Department. We are hovering now around 800, a little bit more than 800. We've hired in the last 2 years about 150 officers, although we're always fighting against retirement. One of the things that happened 5 years ago, the previous administration probably didn't recognize at the time the gravity of this decision, but when they closed the police academy, it has really hindered our ability to hire police officers. So we have money, we have resources, we have in the budget the want to hire police officers, and we try and fill every single academy slot in every county around here. So you would be hard-pressed to find any single academy slot that will take us that we have not filled, ultimately. But there's only so many spots that we're allocated because we don't have our own police academy. We are working with the Attorney General right now to try and reopen the police academy. The challenge on that is that 5 years ago, we were grandfathered in because we had the police academy for a long time. So some of the regulations that are, or criteria that are necessary if you're opening one today did not apply to us. Since it closed down, and now that it reopens, or we want it to reopen, they're saying it does apply to us, and they don't know if they want to approve it ultimately. So this is the dilemma. We go back and forth with the state with saying to them, we need you to tell us that you will approve it before we will build something, right? And they say to us, you need to build something before, so we could see it before we want you, before we're going to approve it, right? So it's a back and forth on this. It's not responsible for us to do something without obviously knowing if it was ultimately going to get the green light. So that's part of the challenge. I also want to say on the policing front that nothing is really so, simple, really. It's a very fluid situation. On the hiring of police officers, one of the initiatives that we've undertaken over the last 2 years was to make sure that the police department reflects the city that we live in. So we live in arguably the most diverse city in the entire country, and when we took office, to use it from an African American standpoint, the number of African American officers above the rank of police officer, that's the entry-level position, the number of African American officers above the rank of officer was 1. It wasn't 1%, it was 1 out of 770. So we have made it our mission to set up an office and a unit that is focused on recruiting predominantly African American men and women to come into the police department, helping them take the test, helping them get through the process to get over the goal line. Now, we have had more diverse classes coming into the police department, which is a positive, but there's 2 sides to that. Many or some of the individuals that we have seen come into the police department that we have recruited, they have dropped out of the police academy literally on day 1 or day 2. The minute they get down there and the drill instructor is on top of them, not physically, but telling them, hey, X, Y, and Z, some of these young men and women come back and they say, I no longer want to do this. And we try our best to counsel them, to say that this is a career, you're over the goal line. But many of them drop anyway. That places strain on the city because once one of them drop out, we can no longer replace that person with somebody else. That spot is gone until the next academy opens up 6 months later. So nothing is so simple on how that works. Where intentions are terrific, the outcome isn't always as terrific as the intentions, and that's a give and take on this. I want to touch on the walking posts. Right now we have about 14 walking posts, I think is the number right now, that are actively going on, and where it's a big push. And people always say, hey, we want more and more walking posts. I would just highlight the fact that walking posts also impact response time. So it's important to look that nothing is so cut and dry. A person on the feet is really the most inefficient way to respond to a call. A guy in a car is going to arrive at a call faster than a person on foot. I think we could all recognize that ultimately. So if you have a set number of people on a shift and you assign more people to a walking post, that means that you have less people in a car. So response times come down ultimately. And so you try to find a balance that works for everybody between walking posts on visibility and response time. Nothing is really as simple as just here is ultimately what it is. Finally, I want to just touch on kind of some of the shootings that you touched on, that you mentioned as well, and some of those kind of troubled corners, and I'll talk a little bit about kind of the challenges that we have with that. So, we will see or we will know that in a shooting situation, often there are witnesses. Like we will either see it on some of these broken cameras, or we will have people in the area initially respond and say that there are witnesses. But when push comes to shove, very few of those witnesses want to move forward and be a part of the process to convict people. That places tremendous strain on what we are trying to do. Because in today's country, in today's world, ultimately, and this is the way the system is set up, it's set up properly, that if you only have a police officer testifying against an individual, the chances of a jury conviction are very small. That's the way the process was set up properly, ultimately. So that places us in a predicament from the prosecutor's standpoint, from the judge's standpoint, recognizing the fact that it is hard to get a conviction, and that's where some of those pleas start to happen, and people get out on the street faster, ultimately. So we need cooperation and a partnership, ultimately, with the community, because that is the only way that you will get some of those people off the street in a permanent way. I'll give you an example that's frustrating for me. At the end of last year, one of the individuals I'm not going to say what his name is, right? But one of the individuals who was involved in a shooting and shot subsequently, had a record where he was arrested for gun charges by the JCPD 7 times, 7 previous times. So, beyond that, when you see in the Jersey Journal or you see in the publication that you see balloons and he was such a nice boy and always involved with the family, I bite my tongue because we're trying to be respectful always, but at the end of the day, I recognize the fact that it is hard to blame the Jersey City Police Department on that because they've arrested the person 7 previous times on gun charges. And think about it from a police officer standpoint for 1 minute there. How scary do you think it is when you are approaching an individual, you pull over a car, or you're approaching an individual and you run those plates and you say, this guy in there has been arrested 7 times on gun charges. It's never so easy as it is just saying, hey, here's what it is, because what I'm trying to get at is you really need community engagement on this that want to be a part of it. All of you are here tonight because you want to be a part of it. So this is not the community group that I'm talking to with regards to that, but I am saying ultimately that it is a broader problem that impacts not just Jersey, this is a national problem as it relates to kind of people snitching and not snitching and really being a part of the process. So I had a couple, who was the next one in order? You, yes.
This is
Get down here.
is there a plan to rethink